Alright, welcome back. Let's continue with the Primal cards. First we have Iceberg Hair-trigger, the Primal version of the 2-drop cycle that you can pay 1 to sacrifice for an effect, and this is probably the worst of the entire cycle, even worse than the time one, since all you get to deal is 2 damage to the enemy player, which is really bad, especially for a Primal card and for a Yeti. It just doesn't do anything meaningful. This card's really bad. Even in limited, this is not very good. But yeah, if you need a 2/2 for 2, this is as good as any, I guess. Next we have Leader's Apprentice. This card is a bit so-so, but has a pretty cool unique effect since it cannot be silenced and other cards you have can't be silenced. So having a way to counteract silence is definitely nice to see and might come in handy. I could see this, for example, in a Haunting Scream deck, playing this on turn 2 into your Haunting Scream unit on turn 3, and then, not getting it back reinforced or something, or Desert Marshaled, like in the past, and being pretty useful there. But outside of that, right now, I'm not sure if any other deck would care about a 2-power 2/3 just to have this effect. But yeah, it's an interesting card, and also it's an unseen, so keep in mind, this card could be what your deck is looking for depending on what you're trying. And in limited, I mean a 2-power 2/3 is nice. The can't be silenced is a nice bonus on top, so a decent pickup, but nothing to pick highly. Next we have Portent Reader, another unplayable card in Constructed usually, but in limited we get a 2-power 1/1 flyer, and it's the Primal version of the summon discard a card to get a spell cycle, and here we get a second sight, so that is not terrible, but it's not great either. So in limited I can see this being okay in a deck, but in Constructed this is unplayable. Next we have Read the Stars, Nightfall, and draw a card, so you get to draw 2 cards, the opponent gets to draw 1 card, but it's not even a fast spell, so yeah. I don't see this being good enough to play in Constructed or Limited, really. Next we have Snowfort Trumpeter, the 2-power 2/2 that Retribute becomes a 3/3, really too weak in Constructed, but in Limited this is a decent 2-drop option. Next we have Tend the Flock, another unplayable card in Constructed, if you ask me. You get to put 3 0/1 sheeps in play for 2 power, and even in Limited I don't really think that's something that you usually want. So yeah, pretty bad card. Next we have Torrential Downpour. I don't think this is anywhere near good enough for Constructed usually. Maybe in a market, but even there I think you can use your 5 slots better. You deal 1 damage to each enemy, including the player. So that's kind of nice since it doesn't kill your own stuff, and it might finish off like an Auric Runehammer in the process and stuff like that. So it has some nice utility, and the Scout is a nice bonus to boot. But yeah, in Constructed, this is very, very fringe, if a consideration at all. But in Limited, this is a decent option. It's also just more of a filler, I think, since most of the 1 health things you kill with this won't be that relevant, if there are any to begin with. But yeah, between the Scout and some utility, this could be an okay filler in Limited. Next we have Acquisitive Crow. Initially I quite liked the card in theory, and the 2/1 flying Berserk's pretty decent. The flying means that the Berserk is much easier to turn into extra damage, making this more than 2 attack virtually long term. Like with the average lifespan of a unit like that, I would say this could almost be considered a 3 attack flyer, which makes it pretty decent. And you also get to draw 2 random 1-cost spells in the process if you Berserk right away. The main problem I see and found when I tried the card is that we by now have so many 1-cost spells, and a lot of them are so bad and so weak that you're just not getting enough value out of the activated like the trigger, and that's the main point of the card. Without the random 1-cost spells mattering often enough, I think the card is just too weak. In Limited, however, this is a great card and a fairly high pick. Next we have Advanced Scout, another limited only card. The 3 power 2/1 flying, nothing to write home about, but playable. And on Infiltrate you get to Scout, so that's a neat bonus. Next we have Aerial Battle, a very fringe potential market option for some very specific decks that struggle with that specifically, but I feel like even in the market this might be a bit too situational and narrow to make it. In Limited, I could see this making your deck, especially if you have some Levitates and stuff, to guarantee that this at least 1/1s at some point. And if the opponent ever has 2 flyers and you hit them with this, this is a devastating blow. So this could be a filler for a limited deck for sure. Next we have Entangling Wines. I think in Constructed this is too narrow and clunky, but in Limited, basically for tempo-y aggressive decks, this is pretty sweet, especially with the Warp. The fact that it's not a fast spell like its non-warp counterpart is a downside, but the Warp makes up for that, so it's about on par with the fast spell non-warp version. And as last card for the second part we have Horde Blunderer. We get a 1/4 Berserk for 3, which is decent in terms of defense. The Berserk means that the weapons that you will likely have in your deck, because your weapon spellcraft for free, will get some serious damage in. And I don't know, maybe there is like a way to build a Skycrack aggro deck with this as a 3-drop and Long Barrel and the +3/+2 4-cost weapon that gives you a torch, and make those like powerful swing cards with this, or even like play this on turn 3, turn 4, put the torch weapon on this, turn it into a 4/6, torch a blocker and then attack for 8. Seems like a nice option. It might be just that this card is a bit too weak when you don't draw your weapons, and the weapons are too weak if you don't draw your Blunderer, so that might just cause too many problems. And there's also the option of trying something like this in a Horror deck with Vanquisher's Blade and the new shield that gives endurance and casts a shield bash on spellcraft, which is pretty nice because then you basically play a 2-cost +2/+2 endurance weapon that also stuns an enemy unit, gives you 2 armor, and draws you a card for 2 power. That's really powerful. And there might also be other ways to make use of Berserk, like Finest Hour and so on, and some Warcry triggers. So yeah, that's something worth messing around with. I don't expect it to turn into a tier 1 deck, but maybe there is a decent playable deck built around this card and some of the good spellcraft weapons. Or maybe we get like more cards that make this better in the future. And in Limited, I mean, if you have a couple of ways to make it useful and a 1/4 body is already decent for your deck, feel free to pick it up. It's no high pick, but it's a card that can make your deck. Alright, that's it for the second part of the Primal cards. So stay tuned for the third part of the Primal review in a moment.